just like to welcome everybody who's attending today to the 100% Renewables and Trellis Technologies webinar, Empowering Climate Action, Harnessing Data and Digital Transformation for Success. My name is Patrick Denver. I'm the co-CEO of 100% Renewables. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to you all and thank you for joining us in what we hope will be an informative and useful discussion on empowering climate action by harnessing data and digital transformation. It's a new world, I guess, where regulatory requirements like the incoming mandatory climate legislation, the Australian Sustainability Reporting Standards, or ASRS for short, are becoming more stringent, and more stakeholders are asking for disclosure on climate metrics. So accurate data management is not just a necessity now, increasingly it's a competitive advantage. Without reliable data, you can't measure your emissions, you can't set realistic climate targets, or can't track your progress towards your sustainability goals. This webinar will show you how to harness the power of digital transformation and data to stay ahead of regulatory changes and lead successful climate action initiatives. Very quick intro to who will be speaking today. So we'll have Barbara Albert, who's the co-CEO of 100% Renewables. And in addition to leading our team, Barbara is a speaker, host of the Driving Net Profit with Zero Emissions podcast, and an award-winning author of the book Energy Unlimited. We'll also have Matt Shorten, who's the co-founder and executive director of Trellis Technologies. So with over 20 years in sustainability auditing, Matt is a registered greenhouse and energy auditor and technical consultant under the Climate Active Carbon Neutral program. Matt's passion for sustainability and tech led him to co-found Trellis. We'll also have a special guest speaker today in Deepa Dasari. So Deepa is an expert in digital process transformation with 18 years of experience, and she's currently the principal project manager of energy systems at the University of Queensland. For my part, I'm Patrick Denver. I'm the co-CEO also of 100% Renewables. And for my sins, I have spent nearly 30 years working in energy efficiency, renewable energy and carbon management consulting across strategy, policy and technical areas. And I've worked with all levels of government and also worked with most business sectors. And I'll be moderating this webinar, including a Q&A session at the end. Very briefly, we're going to cover quite a lot of ground today. So Barbara will kick off our presentations today. She'll talk about data being the foundation for effective climate action. She'll talk about challenges in data collection and the importance of tools. Matt will then talk about the ESG Digital Transformation and provide a demo of the Trellis tool. And lastly, Deepa will talk about her experience from a user perspective. Firstly, today, before we begin the webinar, I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of country. Wherever you are participating in this webinar from, I'm participating from the Gadigal lands of the Eora Nation. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land from which we are all participating today and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Very quick intro about us. If you don't know 100% Renewables, we're a consulting firm that partners with all levels of government and business and industry associations to help them decarbonize. We do this by building carbon footprints and internal capacity, addressing climate risks and opportunities, developing net zero transition plans, setting targets and preparing our clients for reporting. And we also help reduce our customers' value chain emissions by engaging with their suppliers. So we also lead in sustainability communication, offering training courses, producing the Driving Net Profit with Zero Emissions podcast and videos, and sharing insights through blog posts and monthly newsletters. Okay, I'm now going to hand over very briefly to Matt from Trellis to introduce himself and his company, and then he'll very quickly pass on from there to Barbara. Matt, over to you.
Thank you, Pat. Much appreciated. Appreciate the background introduction and welcome everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be talking to you all today. So look, brief background to Trellis is really we are a pioneer and leader in the digital transformation space around ESG reporting. We've been really curating our service over many years, working with many customers across currently over 20,000 unique facilities in Australia and New Zealand to capture, process, validate, interpret mixed format data, specifically related to scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. So we've had a lot of experience with many different organisations, and look to continue that journey and look to learn more about the needs of the audience today. Thank you.
Awesome. And I now have the pleasure to take you through a presentation why data is the foundation for effective climate action. So I'm Barbara. Let's get started. What you see here in front of you is how we help our clients act on climate change. We call it the decarbonized method. As you can see here on the left, it all starts with data. Data really is the foundation for everything else. Data is needed to establish your emissions, which is the baseline of how your organization contributes to climate change. Let's have a look at an example. Here we have collected activity data across multiple Scope 1 and Scope 2 emission sources to arrive at the total carbon footprint. This particular organization's contribution to climate change is nearly 50,000 tons yearly. Data is also needed to track progress over time. You need continuous data to measure whether you're meeting your climate targets, such as a net zero goal, for instance, and how your actions are impacting overall emissions. So here is an example of a carbon footprint across Scopes 1 and 2 and how it tracks over time. There is a reduction, which you can see here in FY23 for electricity-related emissions due to renewable energy purchases from FY22 to FY23. The other thing you can do with your data is benchmark your performance against industry peers. This comparison can help to identify best practices and opportunities for improvement to ensure you're not falling behind in the transition to a low carbon economy. Here's an example of how we are comparing our client's emissions intensity per accommodation facility. Our client has multiple accommodation facilities, and they were interested in identifying buildings that were better performing. In this case, we're looking at the tons of carbon emissions per bed. In your case, you might be using different key performance indicators such as emissions per staff member, per operating hour, per tons of product produced, or per dollar of revenue. Benchmarking can be very powerful. You can either use benchmarking to compare your performance year on year, or compare the performance of different buildings, or you can use it to compare your performance to others in the same sector. Once you've established your carbon footprint, you can use it to engage your internal stakeholders and start building your capacity in terms of your climate response. For instance, you can show your senior leaders where your carbon hotspots are and engage them on action to mitigate these. Or you can use data to empower employees to contribute to sustainability initiatives. You could create programs that allow employees to monitor and reduce resource use in their departments or operations. Here is an example of a carbon footprint we developed for one of our clients, which is a metal fabricator. So they take steel and zinc as inputs and turn them into products such as transformers. Before we developed the carbon footprint, the business was convinced that electricity would be the biggest emission source. But this is the thing about developing carbon footprints. You don't always know what your biggest emission sources are until you start calculating them. So in this particular case, the biggest emission source by far is purchased steel, followed by emissions from transport. Data also helps you assess and address climate risks and opportunities. By tracking resource consumption, such as energy, water, and emissions across locations, you can identify vulnerable facilities or operations that are exposed to climate risks like extreme weather or rising temperatures. For instance, an energy-intensive facility in a heat-prone area may face higher costs and disruptions. Data also ensures compliance with legislation, which is close to everyone's heart, I think, which reduces your risk of penalties or reputational damage, and it gets you assurance ready. Data also helps with your climate strategy. It allows you to break down emissions by activity, by location or process, and this allows you to identify the areas or operations that contribute most to your carbon footprint. Analyzing resource consumption data such as energy use, fuel consumption, or water usage will help you identify inefficiencies and opportunities to improve your processes. For example, energy data might reveal that certain facilities are energy intensive, leading to targeted investments in energy efficient technologies or process improvements or renewable energy adoption, such as solar panels. Here is an example of a net zero strategy that is aligned with science. It builds on calculating the carbon footprint yearly, projecting emissions into the future, assuming business as usual, and determining opportunities that reduce emissions down to net zero by the target year. And here you can see an example of a decarbonization strategy across typical emission sources. The opportunities are staged. For instance, this client organization is upgrading to LED lighting at the moment. They'll introduce electric vehicles in the medium term, and they're aiming for zero waste to landfill in the long term. Once you have the baseline, you can use the data to set realistic goals for cutting emissions, like aligning with the Paris Agreement goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. The data shows just how much you need to reduce and by when. It also helps you track if your climate actions, like energy efficiency or renewable energy projects, are working. And if not, the data lets you adjust your approach to improve results. In this example, which is of a large food processor, you can see a Paris-aligned pathway and the carbon reduction measures needed to meet a 2030 target. As you can see in this graph, the target can only be achieved by installing solar, being more energy efficient, and switching to renewable electricity. Let's talk about disclosure next. Such an important topic. You may have noticed that governments, investors, customers, employees, and other stakeholders are increasingly requiring you to disclose accurate data on your emissions, your climate-related risks, and adaptation strategies. If you have accurate data on emissions, resource consumption, and climate risks, you can provide transparent and credible reports to your stakeholders. You might have heard that the mandatory climate reporting bill recently, and it's very recently, passed Parliament. The first tranche of businesses will have to report from the 1st of January next year, and that really is just around the corner. Here you can see who needs to report and when, and that was one of the comments in the chat earlier. It's all listed here. There are 3 groups all up. The group that you're in determines when you have to start reporting, which ranges from as early as 1st of Jan next year to FY 27-28 for Group 3. Now, this staggered approach will allow for a phased implementation, giving businesses adequate time to prepare based on their size and their capacity. Please note that Group 3 captures quite a lot of organizations, as the thresholds here to pick 2 are over 100 employees and over 50 million in revenue. So it's going down to quite a low company size. If you fall under any of these groups, you will need to report your full carbon footprint, inclusive of your scope 3s. You'll need to disclose the financial impact of climate risks and opportunities, and you need to disclose your transition plan that shows how your business will thrive in a world that's tracking towards net zero. At the moment, reporting requirements apply if you need to lodge financial reports under Chapter 2M of the Corporations Act, and you meet the thresholds indicated on this slide. Now, apart from mandatory reporting, companies that fall under any of the groups listed here have already started to ask their suppliers for carbon footprint information to help them with their scope 3 calculations. So eventually, most of our economy will be affected by reporting requirements. So even if you don't directly fall under any of the groups, you may have already been asked for information by your customers. Now, there's a lot to know about the incoming mandatory climate legislation, which is why we have created a free course to help you navigate all the important aspects, such as creating carbon footprints, managing climate risk and opportunities, developing transition strategies, scenario analysis. It's all in there. You can access the course by clicking on that QR link. That link will take you straight to our complimentary training. Now, for many of you in this webinar, a significant portion of your carbon footprint will come from your supply chain. So to manage these Scope 3 emissions, you'll need comprehensive data from suppliers on raw materials, transportation, product life cycles, and other factors that contribute to indirect emissions, and then work collaboratively with your supply chain to reduce emissions to ensure alignment with your sustainability goals, especially if you have Scope 3 targets as well. Once you have the necessary data, you can engage your suppliers to improve the environmental performance by reducing energy use, adopting renewable energy, changing packaging, or cutting down on waste. Here, you can see two examples of how you can use data to analyze emissions in your value chain. The pie chart is from our work with a pharmaceutical manufacturer, and it shows the contribution of the scopes to the overall carbon footprint, inclusive of breaking the Scope 3s down into the 15 categories as per the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. The graph on the right shows the contribution of individual suppliers to expenditure categories for one of our clients. So data really is quite powerful. You need it to be able to drill down and perform your analysis. So let's turn our attention to what we want and need our data to be. We all know data is essential for climate action, but let's be honest, it's so tough to get together data that's accurate, that's reliable, complete, and because of the mandatory climate legislation or programs like Climate Active, data that can be assurance or is assurance ready. It's particularly tricky if you're creating a carbon footprint for the first time. So let's have a look at some of the challenges you may face when you collect data. Now, data, as you know, usually comes from various sources with inconsistent formats and gaps, and you rely on others to provide the info you need. For example, the facility management team might track electricity usage through a dedicated platform, while procurement logs fuel purchases in spreadsheets. Meanwhile, waste data might be collected by an external waste management provider and be available in a different format or frequency. Some of the information you need may even be buried in emails. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. And then there's the human aspect as well. Departments may guard their data or use different standards, making collaboration really tricky. And without clear communication, you could end up with incomplete or inconsistent data. Plus, some teams might not fully understand why the data they provide matters to your sustainability goals. And even when you do get the data, it may use different units like kilowatt hours for energy, liters for fuel, tons of CO2 for emissions. Converting everything into a standard format takes time and can lead to errors. This lack of consistency makes it really hard to compare and compile everything into a comprehensive report, and that increases the risk of mistakes and delays. For example, trying to compile data from a facility that tracks energy use monthly and another that reports quarterly can lead to mismatches and delays in reporting. And manual data entry only adds to the problem, with the potential of for skipped entries or calculation errors that could throw off your sustainability reporting and decision making. I'm sure you can relate to that list. So let's have a look at common sources of data that you can calculate, that you can use to calculate a carbon footprint. There are two columns here. There's preferred data sources and data sources that are still okay to use, but won't give you the best results. There are data management platforms out there, such as Trellis, that can help you with automating your data collection. Here is how you can get the most from your data management platform and from your consultants. Your data management platform allows you to have centralized data collection and real-time tracking. It can help you with automating your reporting, and it will also help with maintaining accurate data. But data management platforms by themselves, they give you great information, but engaging consultants will help put the information in context. Consultants are able to offer expert guidance. They can use the data to create a strategic roadmap. They can bring your stakeholders along on the journey, and they can tailor their solutions to your needs. With that, I'd like to hand over to Trellis to tell us more about the data management platform.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Barbara. That was a very comprehensive run through, and I think a great segue over to us off the back of this particular slide. Again, thank you guys for having me along today. It's an absolute pleasure to be here speaking with you alongside 100% Renewables. What I'll cover in my sort of 10 to 15 minutes is I'll have a bit of a look at a high level, I guess, some of the drivers around the digital transformation in ESG reporting, a lot of what Barbara's covered in some detail already. I'll then look at some of the key characteristics of what you could expect at different stages of that transformation. And then we'll look quite practically at how some of this comes together when we consider our organization's data set, along with data that's coming from upstream and downstream sources in accordance with the greenhouse gas protocol. I'll then hand over to Deepa Dasari from University of Queensland, and she'll run through in a little bit more detail about how they've implemented and are transforming their processes using Trellis, which will be a great, more detailed insight into the whole process. Of course, there's a lot of detail that sits below a lot of this, and whether or not we get time to deal with any of that today is one thing, but certainly more than happy to continue conversations after. So what we know is there's a lot of work to do. And as this space certainly shifts from a nice to have to a must have, we're seeing increasing demands on sustainability teams, which is not a bad thing, but it's, we're finally getting some of that recognition that I think a lot of sustainability professionals have been looking for 20, 30 years. So that's certainly coming to the Australian economy, which is a good thing. However, there's a lot of questions getting asked and, a lot of demands that, why haven't we done this yesterday? So the good news is with a platform like Trellis, we can really offer that ability to streamline, automate that process heavy grunt work that underpins a lot of the important stuff that organizations need to grapple with. And referring back to one of Barbara's last slides there, looking at that sort of relationship between a digital solution like Trellis and a consultant and customer, we really look at that as a very symbiotic relationship. So we see it as a very much a support and serve function, where a lot of the work that we do in terms of that grunt work around the data processing, validation, interpretation, certainly adds value in terms of the insights and outputs, and how a consultant might engage with that information in detail, how a customer might engage with that information at a higher level, and how an auditor might deal with that at an assurance verification level. Just in terms of some of the key stages or what we call some of the key characteristics about a transformation into more of a digital approach to this process. So I'd encourage you to have a look at this slide in particular and have a think about where your organization might sit. And what I want you to think about here is from a maturity perspective in this space, and if you look at this along the bottom axis here, versus productivity, pace, or governance, have a think about really where it is that you sit. The way we look at this is very much in Trellis from a system-centric approach. So we are looking to very much automate and build in a lot of that functionality, which I'll get to in a little bit more detail. And over at this level, you may be dealing with this at very much a person-centric approach. So it's the system centricity versus people-person centricity. Some of the characteristics here, if you are dealing with it at this level, will be that you're dealing with it in Excel or something like that. So you've got a decentralized data set. You may have questionable data integrity. You may have significant data gaps, high rates of estimation, and really a limited scope of the problem space. So very sort of, hard to see the forest through the trees, so to speak. We have a lot of organizations come to us who are at this level. That is, they have some level of consolidation, so they have some level of data hub established. They've got some level of automation, but some challenges around format changes, new suppliers, different things like that they can't deal with very well. Low levels of scalability, so very limited to some of those more major utilities like, say, electricity and fuel. As a result of some of the gaps and issues there, they're still, getting a low to medium interaction with the data set. Some insights are available, but again, quite limited. At this site, and this end here, where we are in this, system-centric approach, where we look to get our customers to, we're looking at very high levels of automation across all data. We're looking at high levels of scalability, medium to high levels of interaction with the data set, which is super important. So extending beyond the sustainability team and serving, those that may be sitting in finance, asset management teams, facility management teams, etc. Talking about very targeted insights and exception reporting and predictive analytics. So all of these things rely very much on a healthy data bed that we can draw and extract information from in a timely fashion. Integration, obviously very important. Organizations are grappling with many different systems day in, day out. So the ability to be able to transfer key information between systems is certainly very important, whether that's formal APIs or other ways of transferring data. There's lots of opportunities there. I'll also say here that at this point, you have a very, high rate of product evolution. So that is that the system is, aware of market needs, evolution in market requirements, legislative requirements, customer needs, etc., and is able to adapt and engage with you on that journey. So some super critical characteristics about what you'd expect when you are at a higher level of digital maturity that we can certainly contribute to. Thinking about that practically and how it might roll across that sort of upstream, downstream landscape. Some of the colors haven't come through too well on this slide deck, apologies for that, but hopefully you can see, okay, here in the middle, you've got your typical, your organization, the things that you control, scope 1 and 2 emissions. We've got upstream emissions, so we've got category 1 to 8 here, and then the categories 9 through to 15 on the downstream side. Point is, there's a lot of these different activities that need to be captured if we are, really looking at this in detail, as Barbara's outlined. A lot of different data sources, a lot of different suppliers, but all of that can be corralled and fed through to a platform like Trellis. These green squares now that I'm highlighting, and really just to emphasize the fact that 60-70% of this can be done in a very automated fashion. We are seeing certainly continued reliance on spend-based accounting for some of those upstream sources, particularly around category 1 and others. We believe there's a strong reliance on your procurement functions to really start to flex their muscle through your supplier network to start to really demand more information and insights at product or service levels around emissions intensity or emissions values. If we can get those kind of figures, we can certainly embed, those different emission factors into Trellis and capture those other indicators or activity pieces as we move forward. But I'm sure a lot of you are probably dealing with some of that spend-based accounting versus activity accounting, and the reality is it's a expanding opportunity. Certainly at a spend-based, it's available today. But we know, I think everyone on the call would probably accept that it'd be nice to move away from that. Obviously, probably less emissions intensive projects, product services are more expensive. So using a spend-based model doesn't actually work in those cases, because as you spend more based on spend-based accounting, you're actually going to get hit with more emissions. So we need to decouple from that, and a few strategies we can deploy to get around it. What I'll do now is I'm going to just show you a short video of the Trellis interface, so a bit of what I've spoken about, how it comes together. This is a very short video, less than 2 minutes, narrated by Ryan Waddington, our commercial director. So I'll hit play on that and enjoy the video.
To Trellis. This is a very quick overview of what we do. So here you land on the dashboard, you've got all your different resources by the different metrics that we bring them in. You can have a full list of resources that might go down to 15 if you're tracking against the full GHG protocol or otherwise. As you can see, you've got data completeness, summary data, and the ability to drill down into different facility groups, facilities, and meters. As I look through this, you've also got interval data stored within here, as well as a targets tracking module. When you come into that, you'll see the quick dashboard flash up here of the different projections that we're making based on your real data into the future, the ability to set targets, toggle through resources, and drill down into facilities. You can also download a fully auditable plan. Otherwise, you can jump into reporting, create favorites, look through reports, and save them so that you're able to come back to them later. Thank you for this quick Trellis.
Sorry, guys. So, thanks for that, Ryan. Moving on now, just in close, I've got a couple of points I'd like to summarize before I do hand over to Deepa. Look, integrations is certainly, I know, something that a lot of people are interested in. The reality is systems like Trellis are another part of your, I suppose, tech landscape. So some of our customers use upwards of 300 different systems. Not ideal. We're seeing a bit of a shift in the market, you know, as there consolidation, which would be nice. At the end of the day, the best in breed platforms need to be able to fit effectively and function, you know, within that sort of broader landscape. So integrations, whether they're a formal API or transferring data through other means, is absolutely available and absolutely very critical as your tech stack sort of grows and expands and evolves. Second point here, I'd just like to say data. So, you know, Barbara's spoken about data. You would all be living this data challenge. Very important when looking for a supplier of a digital service in this space, that they are strong in their data processing credentials. So there's a lot of noise that's emerging as the market's expanding, particularly around the SaaS side of this. So, you know, very effective and good-looking dashboarding systems. But the critical need that you'll have is going to be in the back-end data processing, validation, interpretation, and the ability for your system to be able to evolve as suppliers and formats and all those things change. Buyers and users, we tend to enter an organization through a sustainability function, but very quickly there are finance, asset, facility management teams that are engaging a lot with our data set. So there is that expanded value that can be achieved, not just scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, those other key business metrics that help drive a better business and a more cost-effective operation. So be very aware that you know, ideally this is not just limited to sustainability people. There's a broader application, certainly for the information that we can compile. Activity versus spend, you know, I spoke a bit about that. I think we're all of the view that we can start with spend-based accounting for some of those particularly upstream scope 3s, but ideally we're moving more and more towards activity-based accounting, and there's a number of ways through that, but that will take time as the market matures broadly. Greenhouse gas factors, you know, we have many thousands in our data set. They are currency based, so they have validity, they change, they need to be managed effectively, and there needs to be scope to be able to bring in custom factors, as we do for many of our clients looking at across different product lines. Speed of product evolution, again, I mentioned this is just such a critical point, and when you are looking for a supplier in this space, this needs to be a critical question. This space is evolving, it is evolving rapidly, needs will evolve, markets will evolve, etc. So the product that you ultimately end up with needs to be able to evolve at a similar pace. And just in closing, I'd just like to say that we actually understand through this program have a special offer, and anyone that is to join Trellis off the back of this webinar at any time in the future will certainly get access to our targets module thrown into to our offer. So you can certainly find out more by contacting myself or Ryan. But on that note, I'm now going to hand over to Deepa Dasari from the University of Queensland, and I'm hoping that she will be able to join and we'll be able to hear her effectively.
I'm here.
You're
Can
there.
you guys
Excellent.
Yes.
Hello, Deepa. Good to see you. Well,
I'm
good to
very
hear.
good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to share my journey. I've been, an technology enthusiast since I think I have been into this career. I have started my journey with process industry. So something I would like to share before I share what I currently do and what I have been trying to do. Just two words is very comes to my mind with anything I do is like being an automation engineer. I always see if I can empower people. How can I just help them to completely move away from doing something manual, use their actual strengths and expertise and create something great. So if my slides are here, I would like to take you on a ride. I have spent 18 years in process industry, from oil and gas, mining, water treatment plant, power station, you name it, and I have worked on them. Process industries are, one thing I will say that when my career started, the first thing I was given was Excel sheet, and that would resonate with you. We just live with Excel sheets. The number of Excel sheets we use, I have used. I have opened them with the same file, revised, revisions, all because there is information that needs to go in different applications or, different platforms connecting with the systems. But one thing I have realized that single source of truth was like really difficult, and you go to any industry, I think it's still difficult to have that something, we call it what Barbara mentioned, like centralized information where people can rely on and bank on. So at process industries, being an automation engineer, as I mentioned, I have played with a lot of instrumentation where, you have sensor information that needs to measure, do a control. They get connected with, especially with now IoT and everything, we have everything wireless, go to different platforms. And at the end of the day, all this information is needed for some kind of reporting. Right now, you're looking for emission reporting, but at process industry, there are different levels of reporting. They need to be, for business decision, what is your production, what is your maintenance, everything is integrated because your source is coming same, like, what we have produced today within water treatment, what was the dosing done, how much chemicals we have used, all that goes and, spread across to different stakeholders and mean something for them, and if we try to capture that separately, it is really hard. And I have done that, like different levels. I have done that, somebody would say that, hey, could you just send us, what you have measured, the temperature data or something. And the same information I have put in different format and created different reports, which becomes like really difficult. But great thanks to Industry 4.0, where we are moving and into digital twin now, where, we can do a lot of simulation. And it's all thanks to data and that integration of different platforms that helps to, move and leverage those technologies where we can, as I said, where we can be empowered to create better rather than just stuck with minor, revising the Excel sheets and other things. But anyway, that was my process industry experience. And I got a break during my maternity, so I studied circular economy because I just wanted to learn how the industry would adapt with the sustainability and all the our sustainable goals. And it was really an interesting journey. And then I got my new role, my current role, which is at UQ. Can we go to the next slide? On my new role, primary responsibility is to work with all the energy assets. I look after the solar farms the UQ has, the batteries we have, and deal with the suppliers, the retailers, because we have a lot of metering, the metering systems. I'm also creating like the metering strategy, like what levels of meters we should have, the sub-metering, so that we could get the asset data. So one of the biggest challenges we had was like we all work in different teams because of our niche on like, sustainability team, energy team, electrical team. But a lot of times we have common things, that is the data we are collecting. So one of my initiatives, which we finished like few months ago, was rollout of Trellis platform. And currently we have Origin, CS Energy, and Urban Ergon for our electricity and gas retail. They are our gas retailers, and then Urban Utilities for water. So you can imagine, I come, I think around every day, we get 3 to 4 invoices every day. Okay, I'm not saying like in a month. Every day we get 3 to 4 invoices, and in a month we handle around 25 to 30 invoices with different periods. And you might know, like some invoices come for the period of monthly, some are quarterly, and sometimes I don't know why the retailer's choice, they sometimes send 4 months. I don't know where it fits, but it's really hard. And so we had a staff who was taking this invoice, these invoices, and they were entering into the Access database. And that was the database which we were using. We were creating Angus reports. We were creating our commercial property information, like which ones are our tenants and which one are not. So it was just going really difficult. Another challenge we had to maintain the Access database, which was going obsolete. So we had a couple of challenges. One was the manual entry, which you can imagine the errors, because sometimes when you have retailers, like their formats are different. The templates we have, they are not consistent. The periods could be different. Some they would write the period on the start, some would write with the breakdowns. So those were few like were becoming critical challenges. And then considering this was done by staff, so we also had people changing hands while they were entering. So anyway, when we rolled out our Trellis, we right now what we are doing is we send our invoices directly to Trellis. And I would like to share my screen if that's okay. I'm not sure. So yeah, so the biggest pain point that was removed was the time period that was like, we entering the data and then consolidating that together. And if we had to represent the information monthly or quarterly in any of the reviews, we had to spend a lot of time. But right now, our invoices directly goes to Trellis. And when I sit with finance and they're like, hey, we are doing budgeting, could you just tell us what you have spent on gas? And I just go there and we would just speak and say that like, hey, last year we spent this, and this is our forecast. We might put like a 2%, 5%. I don't know how many tenants would stay, or we will remove them. So right now I can jump into that rather than going somewhere and creating like Excel sheet, or going back and remembering that which Excel sheet that was. Secondly, we also can see our solar generation data here. We just send whatever we create for LGCs. We just send the report to Trellis, and then it is available in our Trellis platform. And then the water data. The water data is a bit critical for us because we not only get for consumption, but for sewerage. And then that we have to, charge back to our tenants. And then we have to show them the breakdown. So currently having a single platform really helps, especially our sustainability team who does reporting for us. They need all this data from one place, and they were maintaining like because they collect the data every 6 months, they were maintaining multiple Excel files, which was, rewriting the same stuff. And sometimes we have actually found discrepancy between those two files where the water data would not match with the previous one, because we will realize that the period that the invoice would come would be different. But currently with Trellis, where we can request what period we are looking at. And for example, if I want to check like how a certain facility has done. So in a click, I can just quickly see where are we, how are we tracking, what has been the consumption for first quarter or the second quarter, what are outstanding, and things like that. And it not only gives us this information of cost or the consumption. Sometimes we really need to know what has been our, how the bills have come, because sometimes the tenants are looking like the tenants are closing and we have to sort their bills, and then we just jump on their jump on the overview and say that, hey, we got all the bills, but we haven't got the bill for example Feb. Since then we haven't got anything, so we give a follow-up to the retailer saying that, hey, could you just check this meter, and could you send us the invoice? So currently this has been our rollout, which I have been working on, and also I'm working with Trellis to get the bill validation and emission reporting. The bill validation currently is still a bit manual for us. So when we get our invoices, one of our staff just goes through this period, like they send it to Trellis. We just go through the period and say that everything is good, the cost has been good, but we want this to be a automated process so that we don't have to block our staff, especially when they are on holidays or we are changing hands or we have different priorities. We don't want our invoices to get stuck on the process. We just want we get the invoices, we validate them, and it goes to finance for different approvals. So we want that process to be smooth, which I'm right now working on, and also trying to get the emission reporting, which we are currently still doing a bit manually, where we get the reports from Trellis, but we still have to do a bit of checks, which is still manual. So that's how we are utilizing Trellis at the moment. And as I said, like right now, we are trying to empower everybody who is in this journey within our team. So, yeah.
I'm mindful of time. I'm very grateful to all of you who have stayed for the duration and have allowed us to go a couple of minutes over. I want to thank once again our speakers, Deepa Dasari, Matt Shorten and Barbara Albert, for their contributions today. I'd like to thank you all again for joining us.